We are back on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Sunday, December 14th, as you are listening to this. And of course, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, Donald Trump is threatening to sanction the International Criminal Court. Why? Well, they want guarantees from the International Criminal Court that they would not pursue charges or um, indictments on international law against Donald Trump after he is out of office. Well, that's strange. If everything Donald Trump is doing is above board, why would they need guarantees? Could it be that maybe everything he's doing is not above board and that there could be potential for charges such as war crimes? Maybe. The whole thing is shady. But see, this is how Donald Trump operates. Donald Trump does not want to be held responsible, liable, accountable for any of the action he has ever committed. He believes wholeheartedly that he has never done anything wrong in his life. And they want guarantees that the International Criminal Court will not prosecute Donald Trump and potentially anybody else in his administration after he is out of office. Well, we are just over 3 years away from Donald Trump being out of office, if he lives that long. Now, we'll get into his health again in a little while. But if he makes it to the end of his term, he's got 3 years left. Why is he worried about it now? Does he know something we don't know? Are the things I've been talking about potentially going to come to pass? Again, maybe. This whole thing with the International Criminal Court is just causing me a lot of questions. He's threatening major sanctions against the court. Now, what could the sanctions do? I have no idea. I don't know what we could pull off with sanctioning the International Criminal Court that would actually end up being meaningful. I mean, we don't fully participate in the International Criminal Court anyway. There's reports that we don't turn over certain people who have been charged. Um, and there's a lot going on with the International Court that I am not fully versed in. I'm not as well versed in the international stuff as I probably should be. But remember, the International Court is where when there's charges formed against world leaders, things like that, that's where they get brought uh, for violating um, varying world treaties. Like Saddam Hussein, when he was still alive, he was wanted by the International Criminal Court, I believe, for his actions in invading Kuwait. I could be wrong about that. And that's where they also bring charges necessarily, sometimes for things you do within your own country. And then it's up to whether or not your country turns you over or if there's a regime change, things like that, if you actually get held accountable. Now, the International Criminal Court, the way I understand it, was formed out of the Nuremberg trials after World War II, where they were going after everybody who had been part of uh, Germany during World War II and had, just followed orders. They didn't accept that defense in the Nuremberg trials, and they haven't accepted it since, I believe, in the International Criminal Court. But Donald Trump is trying to game the system like he always does. He doesn't want to end up being held accountable for anything he has done. But like we were just talking about, if everything he is doing is above board, why would they need guarantees? Could it be that things he is doing are not above board? Could they be in violation of treaties? Probably. You can't just blow up boats in international waters with no proof, claim they were delivering drugs or contraband or whatever, and then say, well, see, I was justified in doing it with offering no proof. Now, Donald Trump, as he's going about everything, is trying to game it so he doesn't get those charges. But like I said, he's doing this. He's blown up these boats. What he should be doing, and we talk about it a lot, is if they really believe those boats are heading toward the United States carrying drugs, then he should let them get to the U.S. waters, have the Coast Guard intercept them, search the boats, and arrest and charge people for smuggling and hold them accountable in U.S. court. That's the proper procedure. But they're not doing that. Instead, they are doing things like just blowing them out of the sky and saying, well, see, it was justified. But it's not. You can't just justify blowing up boats from another country. Now, MAGA, of course, is going to cheer and say, well, Donald Trump, look at how tough he is. This is also another distraction. It's potentially that these sanctions have nothing to do with the boats. They have nothing to do with other human rights violations, just thinking off the top of my head. And it could have everything to do with Epstein. Now, we know that Epstein had an island, Little St. James, in the Virgin Islands. Okay. And he was moving underage girls all around the world, performing who knows what with them, having rich clientele who was doing who knows what with them. Nothing legal by any means. And that there could be major violations of international law, that they could, be violating the law in multiple countries, not to mention things that would land you in front of the ICC with everything related to Epstein. So are the Epstein related things what they're worried about when it comes to the International Criminal Court? Again, that could be. Now, we are hearing from the House Oversight Committee. They've released some photos when it comes to Epstein. And they've released, like yesterday, I think we talked about 20 pictures, something like that. And they've released some more, but still nothing overly graphic. And all it does is show that these people were around Epstein. They haven't released any of the horrible photos yet. Still working on redacting everything, doing it in a way that you can't, you know, get the information back, so that once they block out like the face and the private areas, etc., so that stuff doesn't get out to the public, and that people don't edit out their redactions and try to identify the victims, or spread more of the child abuse materials, that kind of thing. This is a very touchy situation. They have to be very careful with how they end up handling everything when it comes to uh, what they can release and stuff. And we at least assume that with 95,000 images in the possession of the House Oversight Committee, and these are images that came from the Epstein estate, not the DOJ. We don't know how many of these were also in the hands of the DOJ. As these images are out there and more comes out, it is going to be worse and worse for everybody that is in this, the Epstein files. So it's potentially possible that the Epstein files could be another reason why he is putting sanctions on the International Criminal Court. And then you have this tanker, this oil tanker with 1.2 million barrels of oil, that was heading towards someplace in Asia that Donald Trump has seized. He had the military seize it, claim it was a sanctions violation. Supposedly it was flying the wrong country's flag, but with it being this administration, it is hard to believe that that is necessarily true. They have proven time and time again that they won't necessarily release what they have as far as credible evidence, and they will just say things and hope that we believe it. There's a lot of things you can point to. Unfortunately, MAGA will not believe it. They will find a way to explain it away. So with this tanker, that could be, again, if it wasn't seized correctly, etc., and it turns out to just straight be piracy, that could be something else this administration is worried about as far as the International Criminal Court. So is any of that why Donald Trump is trying to pressure it? Is it just trying to distract away from all of those negative things, maybe distract away from the economy and make him look like the tough guy? Could be. Could be. The other thing is, like I said toward the beginning of the podcast, we're 3 years, just a little over 3 years away from Donald Trump no longer being president of the United States if he lives long. And again, we're going to get into his health later on because we still have to talk about everything going on with his health. But this whole thing, as he is staring at 3 more years of presidency, I've been questioning at what point do the Republicans walk away? Politicians care about their own power above and beyond everything. I mean, caring about whether or not you have power explains how we have Chuck Grassley here in Iowa as a senator who is 92 years old and wants to run for re-election in 28 at 95. He is the highest ranking Republican in the Senate. He is currently, as long as Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, he is third in line for the presidency. That's a pretty powerful person. Caring about whether or not you get reelected is one of the things at the forefront of every politician. Okay. And there's a bunch that are not seeking reelection. Some of them are dropping out to run for other races, you know, they're going to run for governor of their state or they're going to run for Senate or what have you. But a bunch need to be reelected. Now, at what point do the Republicans say, okay, our future, we still have one. Donald Trump does not. At most, he has got till January 20th, 2029. He is not eligible to run for reelection. We don't have the votes to change the U.S. Constitution in time. To pass an amendment to make it so Donald Trump could run for a third term would require 2/3 of the House, which is like 290 members of the House. There's only like 220 Republicans right now. And come January 5th, there'll be 219 when Marjorie Taylor Greene resigns. And there's going to be more resignations potentially coming as the fallout continues and as Donald Trump starts to crumble with everything going around him. And as it all goes down for Donald Trump, he is going to take the Republicans with him. So at what point do the Republicans say, okay, enough is enough, and we got to get rid of this guy? Now, is he worried about that? Is that why he is going after the International Criminal Court? Because he's afraid that he may be out on his ass sometime between now and January 20th, 2029. See, and if he's not, somebody in his administration is, I think. Because Donald Trump doesn't look that far ahead typically. Donald Trump, when it comes to getting out of problems, he is only worried about now. He is trying to shift and divert and distract and delay away from things that are going on right now. That is why he signed off on the Epstein files. Okay, you remember almost a month ago now, the Epstein files were due for a vote in the House of Representatives with a discharge petition. Now, they delayed it like 6 weeks thanks to Mike Johnson keeping the House out of session while they tried to pressure Democrats to open the government back up. And I'll come back to the government shutdown here in just a minute. But he kept the House out of session for 6 weeks. And that delayed a vote on the Epstein files for 6 weeks. And he kept getting a win there. And then when they couldn't delay it anymore, suddenly what does Donald Trump do? Oh, yeah, vote for him. I want you to release the files. Do it. Go ahead and release them. It's cool. Go for it. Really? He was okay with releasing the Epstein files after forcing a delay for 6 weeks. He says vote on it. And then the House votes on it 427-1. Senate passes it unanimous. He said vote for it because he hoped it was going to get over to the Senate and the Senate was going to stall it for a couple of weeks. And then when they didn't, he's like, well, shit, I better sign it. And he took like 2 days, but he signed it. And then once he signed it, it bought him 30. And now they're trying to find a way to avoid releasing the Epstein files. And as you are listening to this, we're about 5 days away from the Epstein files supposed to be released. So by the end of next week, everything is supposed to be released in a downloadable and searchable format. Now, what does that mean? Well, if everything comes out like they say it is supposed to, um, it is going probably the rest of the year after that is going to be spent with people and tons of news stories of what did people find, what is in there, there is going to be major blowback from all of this. We're already seeing some of it. I talked about those pictures that had come out, and people are already spitting up and getting pissed off at certain people. Bill Clinton, Bill Gates. No question that Steve Bannon was there. Donald Trump had been in a photo with 6 of what appears to be the survivors. Now, it could be pure coincidence, but it doesn't seem like it would be a coincidence. He ends up in a picture with 6 of the survivors, all at the same time, all at the same event, and the image somehow just happens to end up in the hands of the Epstein estate, but it's all above board, and Donald Trump didn't do anything with the victims. It's a little hard to swallow. It is possible, but we're talking in the single digit percentile of possible. I mean, the whole thing, as more and more come out with this, and as we dig through what is in the files, Donald Trump is going to start losing his mind. He's going to continue to do things like pressure the international court and other things, trying to divert, distract, and get away from everything that is happening around him. Now, when a narcissist like Donald Trump is cornered and he can't divert, distract, and delay, ultimately he may end up trying to cut a deal. And I would think he would if he was in his right mind, but he's not. He's no longer in his right mind. Donald Trump is delusional at this point, at best. Okay, he's got dementia, very clearly. He's sundowning. We've talked about how he spends all night posting on Truth Social. Just the other night, I think it was last night, he had like another 3 hour posting spree where he was going at a rate again of about one a minute, not reading, not comprehending anything he was posting. He was just rapid fire stream of consciousness as he was thinking about something, as he was scanning through Truth Social and other places. He found something that made him look good, or he thought made him look good. Send it out. Didn't matter if he found it again 10 minutes later. He'd forgotten that he'd already sent it out. Retweet, repost, all that stuff. Donald Trump is not in good health. The stress from the Epstein files, the economy, all of it is going to come crashing down around him. Now, I was talking about Donald Trump knowing, or at least wondering, if everything is going to come crashing down around him. And it's entirely possible, right? Um, like I said, he's worried about the International Criminal Court coming after him. Well, he's got 3 years left, but they're worried about when he's out of office. So why would he be worried about it now? Well, I've said before, Republicans are going to be worried about them getting reelected. And at some point, they're going to have to decide whether or not they need to stick with Donald Trump, or if it is more beneficial to them to cut ties. And as everything comes out with the Epstein files, as the economy goes to shit, if they don't pass anything on the Affordable Care Act, come back to that again in a little bit. As all of that is going on, the Republicans are going to have to decide: is it time to cut ties? Do we impeach and remove him? Do we use the 25th? And with his health, we see the sundowning. We see the signs of dementia. We see him sleeping in public, falling asleep in cabinet meetings, and falling asleep in it. Basically, the minute he gets done talking, and he passes the mic to somebody else, or here, you take over, you talk for a little bit. You see him. He just kind of starts to drift and doze, and then he pops back up. Earlier this week, he had that meeting with where he was talking about bailing out the farmers, and I don't even know if that bailout has happened yet, but they were talking about it and how it was going to be 11 or 12 billion dollars. Far cry from the money that was actually just going to be purchased from China or in soybeans from China, yeah, and that it was going to help farmers or whatever. And all of a sudden, he pops up $12 billion. Like he knew that that was the big talking point because it sounds impressive. But when you know China had originally intended before Donald Trump fucked around with the tariffs to buy $20 billion of soybeans, and that's just soybeans, that changes things, and that's not enough to actually offset all of it. So he was drifting off in public, right? With his health being an issue. Do they use the 25th Amendment? Now, that would take J.D. Vance and a chunk of the cabinet to move on Donald Trump. And that meant having the cabinet full of nothing but sycophants of Donald Trump is going to make that hard. However, we've been talking about how there's been a move to potentially impeach and remove several members of his cabinet. Certain members are going to be facing um, some serious questions and some serious pushback as they're looking at potentially questioning Pete Hegseth over the boat strikes. You've got Kristi Noem, ICE, um, basically was told by a Democrat that we're going to impeach you, we're coming for you. Um, you either need to get fired by Donald Trump, you need to resign, or you will be impeached. Now, those are pretty strong words, and I wonder if they actually have the votes to do it. But Republicans could be making the moves behind the scenes. I've said it before. I think, now, I'm not in Washington, D.C., I'm not up on Capitol Hill. Okay. I'm just a guy in his living room in Iowa talking about what I think is going on. But what I think they're doing, because it makes sense, is that they're having closed door meetings. Okay. And Donald Trump would never know about these meetings. Now, he may know the meeting happened, but he would never be told the real reason as far as what is being discussed. And I think they are discussing what to do about Donald Trump. Do they move away from Donald Trump? Do they walk away? Do they run away? Do they say, no, Donnie, we got, you're too impaired. We got to go with somebody else. Now, he will never admit that he is impaired. He's talked about having these cognitive tests. He's talked about having an MRI, but doesn't know what they were looking at. But it was the best MRI ever. Everything was perfect. Now, one Democratic member of Congress, whose name I can't think of right now, has said she believes that he is taking IV anti-dementia meds to the tune of $26,000 a treatment, and that one of the side effects of it is, or one of the parts of the treatment, rather, is the need for more um, MRIs, more constant testing, and things like that. So we know he has had a couple of physical exams already this year. He's had uh, two, one of which had an MRI. Now, he doesn't know what the MRI was for. Um, but according to this representative, um, it is entirely possible that it is because he is on anti-dementia drugs that could lead to him needing advanced imaging and more cognitive tests. Now, Donald Trump himself has just came out a few days ago saying he had aced a third cognitive assessment. And he talks about how nobody could pass him. Nobody could pass the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. I encourage you to look up the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. If you aren't familiar with it, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment is something that most children should be able to pass. They ask you basic questions. Correlate the numbers 1A to B3C and basically connect those dots. Can you do that? Do you know what year it is? Do you know who the president is? Do you can you remember 5 words for, I think it's 10 minutes, it might be half an hour, whatever the period of time. It's not that long of a period of time, but they give you a list of 5 words. And that one might be the one that trips up a lot of people because it's a tougher question. Don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people who can't remember a list of words for very long, but that's only one part of the exam. Then they ask you things like draw a clock. And can you correctly draw a clock face, an analog clock face, not a digital? And can you can you draw it to a specific time? And how close do you get? Now, they're not looking for artistic ability. They are looking for, do you get it roughly right now? A lot of people can't draw a perfect circle, but you can get close enough that you know what's going on, right? And they're looking for how shaky your hand is as you're drawing it. Like, are you having trouble concentrating as you get that circle right? Where do you put the numbers in the circle? Do you have them roughly spaced out correctly, or is everything bunched up to one side? And then you write in the time. And what they're looking for in that part of the exam is, what does it look like? Okay. Do you recognize, can you actually do this part of it close enough, again, not looking for artistic ability, but enough that most people would know what you're trying to convey? And um, if you're off, do you even recognize that it is off? And then they ask you to identify like 3 or 4 animals by their picture, very basic, a generic image of like a lion, a giraffe, and a camel, or an elephant, or something like that. Enough that most kids would get that right. They would look at it and go, lion, giraffe. Like they would know over a certain age. Um, but Donald Trump has talked about signing at least or having at least 3 physicals. So does it get to a point when the Republicans say, okay, well, we're looking at removing members of the cabinet, so the threshold for JD Vance is lower for the number of people he needs on his side to go with the 25th? And then are they having the conversations behind closed doors going, this is what we got to do to get rid of Donald Trump? There is going to come a point, and Donald Trump and his cronies are going to be blindsided by it, where the Republican Party moves away from Donald Trump. That they decide it is not time, or that it is not uh, politically better for them to be connected to Trump and he has to go. Now, that may be before the midterms, or it may be shortly after. But I don't think the Republican Party holds on to Donald Trump all the way until 2029. He is going to be considered a loser after the midterms. And he's terrified of looking like a loser. He lost the House during his first term, right? And he lost it pretty big. Now, they still were able to get some things accomplished bipartisan, but it was the very basic uh, functions of government, right? Keeping things funded. And when you have Democrats in control of the House, it is going to limit what this administration can do. And there are going to be so many congressional investigations into everybody and everything this administration is doing that it is going to probably turn the tide of public opinion against this administration. Now, Donald Trump wants you to believe that he holds the reins and he is all there and he's got an iron grip, but that grip is slipping as not only are they looking at whether or not to remove him with the 25th. We've been talking about the Epstein files and how maybe it connects to the International Criminal Court, but just in general, I've said a lot that the Republican Party cares about the Epstein files. The MAGA voters care about the files. And that's why they voted 427-1. They tried to push it under, but once the public got behind it and it they realized that they would have to answer to their voters on whether or not they voted to protect people who have harmed children, that they had to make a tough choice, and they decided to release the files regardless of what this administration had said. Remember, up until like 2 days before that vote, Donald Trump had said things like, well, if you vote to release the files, you're hostile to this administration. He was fighting as hard as he could to not release the Epstein files. He was trying so hard. He was so desperate to not release the files. And then when he saw the writing on the wall, he decided against it and said, okay, well, we got to do something. We got to make it look better for me. That's a classic narcissist move. They'll buck something up until the point when they have to um, side with it because that is the better option for them. They only care about how things are perceived for them. Now, with the Epstein files, could the Republicans use that as a way to get rid of Donald Trump? I think they will. I really do. I think they will use the Epstein files as a way to get rid of Donald Trump. I think he's going to try to fuck around with releasing them. At this point, he is down to 5 days, but it was all about buying him more time. He thought he could extend it out 30 days and he would come up with a plan. He would find a way to get out from under it. And that hasn't happened, right? See, I've talked about it before. Donald Trump reminds me of a friend of mine. This particular friend, for a long time, would end up being short on bills, overspending, doing dumb shit, and didn't, needed to get a different job, but didn't, right? Well, they'd be short on their bills. So they would take some stuff over, get a pawn load on it, run to the pawn shop. Okay, I got the 50 or $100, whatever I'm short this month. Then the end of the month comes by. They're still short money, still on bills, and they would go get another loan to pay the interest on the first loan and to pay their bills. But they bought themselves another month. It got to the point by the end, before he ended up having to give up on everything and letting the pawn shop just keep it all, that he was paying them 2 and 3 days at a time, but he was paying 2 and 3 days or a week. Well, all my paychecks here, I can only pay for 7 days. He'd buy himself 7 more days, but he kept telling himself that this is the weekend I'll find something at a garage sale. This is the weekend I'll see something on Facebook Marketplace that I can buy for $20 and I can sell it to the pawn shop for 100 and I can get something back. Or I'm gonna come up with a little bit more money. Now he did. It's the way he finally got out was by getting a different job and actually, having more money. But it took him years to figure it out. But he kept focusing on, I just got to get myself a few more days. I got to get myself a few more days. And that's what Donald Trump is doing with the Epstein files, just trying to buy himself a few days at a time. He wants to uh, protect himself, to save himself from any embarrassment when it comes to Epstein. He doesn't want to release them as this all comes out. He is trying to buy himself some time. But when it all comes out, and if he fucks around with it, the Republicans might say, yeah, I got to answer to my voters. It's all about getting myself reelected. It's time. We got to move away from Donald Trump. And they may end up voting to impeach and remove him. And I think somebody in his administration is seeing that coming and is trying to do things like this pressuring of the ICC, um, the International Criminal Court, to not go after Trump when he's out of office because they're worried that Trump will be out of office sooner than January 20th, 2029. Now, I want to go over something when it comes to J.D. Vance becoming president. J.D. Vance becoming president is actually not going to be as bad as having Donald Trump in office. Is J.D. Vance as dumb as Donald Trump? No. He is actually smarter than Trump. Not by much, but he's smarter than Trump. JD Vance is also not battling dementia and other cognitive issues. So he is not going to be having those issues. Plus, JD Vance will listen to advisors. Okay. He will get better people and he will be able to get better people around him. Donald Trump got who was available. He wasn't able to get the best people. Now, don't get me wrong, during his first term, he burned through advisors too. And he burned through people in the cabinet, but they brought people in who were, for the most part, relatively qualified. Now, like Bill Barr for Attorney General. He had been Attorney General under George W. Bush. He had done the job before. Despite all of his faults, he was qualified to be the Attorney General. And for the most part, the DOJ operated the way it should have during Donald Trump's first term. It was independent of the administration. He did his thing. Sure, he did some things to help Donald Trump, but they were still operating independent. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, is just Donald Trump's lapdog and doing whatever he says. He says, indict this person, she's indicting him. I did not expect her to be doing that when she got promoted, considering she had been state attorney general. I thought she would have more integrity, but she apparently does not. Now, JD Vance, when he becomes president, a lot of these people are going to be gone. Maybe not all at once, but I think people like Dr. Oz, um, people like RFK Jr., Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Linda McMahon. I think they all go one at a time, kind of slowly, and JD Vance will put in better people. And he will actually listen to those better people, and he would have more people willing to work for him. Beyond that, if they do use the 25th Amendment or an impeachment against Donald Trump, JD Vance is going to be looking very cautiously at Congress, specifically as long as Republicans are in power, going, wait, you just got rid of my boss. You just fired my boss. I'm going to be walking on pins and needles and eggshells trying to make sure you don't do it to me because you could do it again. JD Vance will be a very weak president when he gets put in. Now, if it happens after the midterms and Democrats have control of one or both chambers of Congress, JD Vance ain't getting anything through. And as far as replacing members of the cabinet, if the Democrats have the Senate, well, they would have to be pretty decent appointees for the Democrats to have confirmed them. So JD is going to be in a bad situation, right? He's going to have to pick decent people. And the Republicans are going to try to make JD Vance sympathetic going into 2028. That they are going to want to worry about what the voters think about them, etc. And they're going to want to make JD Vance out to be this sympathetic person of, well, you need to give a JD Vance a full term with Republicans in control so he can fix all the damage the Democrats caused because the Democrats had control of Congress and they were blocking him. Something like that. I can see them trying to spin that narrative. Now, it has been suggested by some people that the plan could be that JD Vance goes out, he appoints somebody reasonably minded like a Brian Kemp, and that Brian Kemp ends up as vice president, and 6 months, a year in, depending on how much time is left with JD Vance's term, that they do the same thing. They try to remove JD Vance. They find something to nitpick him on and get him gone, to put it that the Republicans would want then say Brian Kemp and go, I kind of fell ass backwards into this. I was appointed by Vance. I wasn't part of the previous administration, and he would be very sympathetic then going into the general in 28. However, I don't think the Democrats are going to fall for that, unless whatever they have on JD Vance is pretty damning, that they would be able to, um, agree with Republicans. They're going to see that play coming a mile away, and they're going to tell Republicans, no, you wanted JD Vance. We're not doing your dirty work for you. You're stuck with him. Best thing for the Republicans, honestly, would be if the Big Mac gets a hold of Donald Trump and his health goes sideways. We already know, we've talked about his health and how bad it is. If he has some major event on TV that they can't hide, they can't do away with, and they have to potentially, like, he has a massive heart attack on stage somewhere, and it's very clear he doesn't make it, right? Something like that. Now, if it happens peacefully, like he just doesn't wake up one morning, something like that, Republicans may try to hide that for a couple of days while they try to regroup behind closed doors. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't get told and he just disappears for a couple of days. We've already seen him kind of do that a couple of times where he has disappeared out of the public limelight. Um, and that's part of what led people to think that maybe he was getting treatments of some kind, that it was uh, that he was recovering from whatever they were doing. Now, ultimately, I think the Democrats need to look into everybody connected to Donald Trump, everybody connected to this regime. And when they hold their congressional investigations, they need to look into his health, no matter how he goes out. And they need to figure out who knew what and when and go from there, right? They need to figure out what this administration has been hiding from us and how we can go ahead and make sure this never happens again. All right, we've been talking a lot about the International Criminal Court and how everything Donald Trump is doing right now is connected to, with him pressuring them, is connected to his future as president. I think his time is going to be limited. I would be very surprised if he makes it to the end of 2028, if he makes it to the end of his 4 years. Um, his health isn't good. Politically, he is going to be a pariah, and the Republicans are going to want to change the narrative. That is the big takeaway there. Now, Republicans, this isn't normal politics, right? This isn't business as usual. We are dealing with something different. We are dealing with um, Republicans trying to save their brand, to save their hide, right? They want everything to work out, but they don't know how to go about getting to that point at this point, because they're worried about losing that MAGA voting base. And that MAGA voting base is going to be affected very heavily if they don't do something about the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Now, so far, they have tried to pass a couple things on the ACA subsidies. Um, the one was this Trump backed health plan. We're hearing that there are more Republicans getting on board, and it only takes 5 to force a discharge petition in the House. I don't know if they pass something in the House if the Senate would take it up, but that more Republicans are getting on board with this idea of just extending the ACA subsidies. And I still think that is what they are going to do. I think the rest of this is performative. They are they are doing it, one, for an audience of Donald Trump, so they can show how it's just not working. Two, they are doing it to engage public perception. Ultimately, they want to starve out the Affordable Care Act. They do. They don't want to fund it because funding it means people get health care. And it means that the Affordable Care Act works. They have been trying to say since it got passed, I believe it was 2010, that the ACA was a failure. Now, people believe Obamacare is a failure, but they can't tell you what Obamacare is, the ones that do that. They believed all of the propaganda put out by Fox News and other places like that saying that it is, that there were death panels involved and all the government's going to have a say in your health care. Not really. Actually, what the government did was say the insurance companies had less say in your health care, which is ultimately what we need to do. Now, where do we end up with the Affordable Care Act subsidies? Ultimately, I think they're doing some performative votes right now, trying to pass the other fixes. And when they're not passing, I think what they're going to do is pass a 2-year stopgap, kick the ACA subsidies as they stand down the road to 2027, to the end of 27. Why? Well, I think the Republicans, this all kind of ties back into, in part, what we had been talking about earlier. But I think twofold. One, I think the Republicans can get Donald Trump to sign off on it by saying, look, we've been trying to pass your plan, okay, but we need more time to get it perfect. And we need more time to make it work exactly right because you don't want to look like a failure and a loser when it doesn't work the way we promise, right? And of course, he'll say, I don't want to look like a loser. I don't want to look like a failure. And he'll just say, they'll tell him that we need more time to draft it up and to get it right to make sure it works the way they want it to and that it is going to actually fix things. Now, do they have any intention of actually passing his plan? Probably not. But that's all you need to tell him, and he'll go along with signing the extension of the ACA credits because in his mind he would look like a hero for saving everybody's health care right now in the moment, even though this we shouldn't be. What is today, the 14th? We are 17 days away to the end of the year. We shouldn't be 17 days away from some people's healthcare going up to at least 400% what it was now. Some of those prices I have seen are going to be absurd, and people will choose to not get healthcare if these are allowed to expire, so that they can tell him that. Okay, and I think the 2 year is perfect because they don't have to really answer the questions when it comes up in the election next year, as far as people who are up for election, which would be the entire House and 1/3 of the Senate. When the reporter says, "Well, what do you say? What are you going to do with the ACA subsidies?" Well, we've got till the end of 2027. We're going to get to work. We're going to start looking at ways of seeing if we can make it better, and if we can replace it with something better, that's what we're going to do. If not, we will figure out what we have to do between now and 2027. They could give a generic answer like that and say, well, basically, we'll deal with it when we kick the can down the road. And if the Republicans lose control of both chambers, well, Democrats are in charge. Then Democrats have to be the one to deal with Donald Trump. But it could also be the thing where 2 years gets them past Donald Trump. If everything we were talking about earlier, because of the paranoia from Donald Trump, if other Republican members are looking at it going, yeah, there's paranoia here. There's something coming. We're going to get rid of him, or his health is going to get him, or whatever. If any of that is going to come true, maybe they're looking at it going, if we can get him to agree to 2 years, we'll have to deal with JD Vance then. And JD Vance would be, again, the better option. JD Vance would listen to advisors. He would listen to Congress. And when they say, hey, this is the best deal you're going to get, you need to take it, well, he's going to take it. So I think ultimately we're going to end up on a 2 year extension of the ACA subsidies. I don't think they want to do 1 year. I really don't think 1 year is going to pass because then the next election is going to be entirely about healthcare and probably the Epstein files. But a big chunk of the next election would be on the ACA subsidies. And Republicans know if they come out saying that they're going to repeal the ACA without a plan, etc., that they'll get just utterly destroyed in the election. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about the government shutdown and how the Democrats did cave on healthcare then. I said I'd get back to that. Well, I'm coming back around. Um, as far as the Democrats not taking care of this uh, with the government shutdown, they weren't really given a choice. If they wouldn't have given in when they did, the government would probably still be shut down. Now, some of the things that they got out of funding the government is actually going to work out in their favor. Okay. We have another funding deadline coming up in January. I don't remember if it's the 20th or the end of January, whatever, doesn't matter. And if we haven't figured out healthcare by then, and they haven't come to terms for the rest of funding the government, there could be another government shutdown. But see what the Democrats got in their last shutdown fight actually strengthens their hand as they're trying to push on the rest of it right now. And you're probably thinking, Eric, how so? Well, Democrats didn't want people to continue going without food. This administration was doing everything in its power to not release food stamp money, including using the emergency fund that is supposed to be there for times like this when the government is shut down. Donald Trump used it during his first term to fund food stamps, except he didn't this time. Said there's no money there. It's not what it's for. Well, he didn't say there was no money. He just said that's not what it's there for. And they tried to explain it away. When he was told by the courts that they had to fund food stamps, they appealed, trying to make sure people couldn't eat. Things like that. And ultimately, Democrats got food stamps funded until the end of September. They got a bunch of the fired government employees brought back. Um, they turned around and they got some other considerations that they weren't asking for initially. Now, I really thought what was going to happen with the government shutdown fight is they would have gotten all of those conditions after they had gotten the Republicans to agree to like a 2-year extension on the ACA subsidies. However, Democrats even offered them just a 1-year straight extension, and the Republicans wouldn't budge. Now it's down to nut cutting time. Now it is down to the wire. And public outcry as they are seeing the sticker shock of not renewing those subsidies, and they're seeing what their insurance is going to. Republicans are panicking. They're trying to pass last minute bullshit stuff. That's why I think it's going to be a 2-year extension. Democrats may actually come out of this with a 2-year extension of the ACA subsidies, and they may end up getting all of the other stuff that they got when they caved in and they opened the government, the other concessions. Now, if the ACA subsidies expire and people start being hurt, we need to hold Democrats accountable just as well and start primarying out those that we can. Now, when I say that, I mean the ones in districts that we will win regardless. Now, I know he is no longer in the Senate, but I'm going to use him as my example. If you have somebody like a Joe Manchin in West Virginia, where somehow was able to win in a very red state or a red district, not a purple swing state or something like that. We're talking, where the majority of all elected officials across the state are Republican, yet you have a Democrat who can win. That's not the guy you primary. You take the ally where you can get them for now. You make sure you get back in power, and then once you're in power, then you worry about you know getting rid of that person and bringing in somebody else. You use the people you can get when they are winning in areas where they shouldn't. Okay. So we're going to be watching all of that go down. Now, as more and more details come out over the weekend, going into next week, as we get closer to the Epstein file release on the 19th, um, expect more and more panic from this administration, more and more crazy shit. I fully believe there's going to be more crazy shit. I mean, they already there's already a lawsuit. The last thing I want to touch on real quick, speaking of crazy shit, I'd almost forgot about this story, that the administration was sued by a civil liberties group for the deaf, trying to force this administration to provide sign language interpreters at events. And not every time is there going to be somebody available to sign, because Donald Trump takes questions from the press a lot of times at random events. I think they are only looking at the scheduled known quantity events, like, hey, we're doing a press conference today at 2, and then they bring in a sign language interpreter. And the DOJ is trying to defend not providing that sign language interpreter. Why? Because they say, well, that prevents the administration from being able to control the narrative about what they're actually doing and what's going on. What does that actually mean when you think about it? Well, I think it means that they're lying about what they're doing when they release press events, and when they release clippings and stuff. They want to control, who gets access and which reporters are going to be there, if there are um, reporters, so the event gets covered the way they want. They get the message out that they want. You know how Fox News likes to spin and only show parts of clips and stuff to make it sound like things aren't what they really are. That's what this administration wants to do. And not having a signer there takes at least a section of this country, and I don't even know how many deaf people there are in this country or even worldwide, but the people that would require a sign language interpreter um, would not be able to have access necessarily to the event and to see what's going on in real time. They would have to rely on transcripts and media reports that they could read, things like that. And not always does closed captioning work as intended. A lot of times, closed captioning is done pretty much, I've seen it, where it's done live. And that doesn't always get the same message across that is actually being conveyed in the moment. So this administration is trying to defend a lack of accessibility, even though they want us to believe that they are the most transparent administration ever, by saying, well, it's fine. We're going to do this, and we're going to go ahead and have not have the interpreter. It's fine because we want to control our story. Well, that's bullshit, and they should lose. This should be an easy case. But that is just some more of the crazy shit that this administration is doing. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. That's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast. I'll be back tomorrow. There's always stuff to talk about. Keep an eye out for me over on TikTok. I know the last few days I haven't had as many TikToks posted. Work schedule's been a little hectic. They changed my schedule again. Had just kind of gotten into a routine, and I got moved around. So readjusting to a new schedule, trying to figure out the best way of getting them recorded, getting them posted, all of those things. But keep an eye out for me over on TikTok at Analytical Iowan. Um, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more, because there's always stuff to talk about. Thanks for listening.